Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Brandformance. Today's episode was originally an office hours. We do these once a month with Matt Hammel, who is the co-founder at AirOps. If you haven't heard about AirOps, they are essentially an end-to-end platform for winning in AI search. Matt and I talked about his philosophy of teaching first and selling second. This is obviously quite core to what we do at Paramark as well. And if you want to get a leg up on all things SEO, AEO, AI search, and how to use this teach first, sell second mentality, this is the episode for you. So let's dive straight in. Matt, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry for being a few minutes late.
You are good, Matt. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another live office hours. These are not your typical webinars. We are going to get straight into some juicy topics all about, how do you say it, Matt? Teach first, sell second. T1S2. I love that.
And then too, yeah, the acronym we can leave or take the acronym, but yeah, teach first, sell second was how we talk about it.
I love it. So welcome everybody. I'm just going to get into our slides and present, but really want to thank you, Matt, for taking time. I know you are a busy person. And with that, I'm just going to put the slides up on the screen and then we can just jump in. Quick intro to Matt. So Matt is one of the co-founders and the COO at AirOps. If you haven't heard of AirOps, what are you doing? You're living under a rock. You need to go check it out. It's the end-to-end platform for you to not only understand what's happening in all things LLMs, AI search, GEO, AEO, but more importantly, what actions you should take based on those insights and how do you drive growth. Did I get that right, Matt?
That's a fantastic summary. Yeah, I think you nailed it. We're hiring for a product marketer in case you have some spare time.
There we go. All right. If this Paramount thing doesn't work out, I know what to do next. So fun story for people. We got to know each other because of a LinkedIn DM. I think I DM'd you like a couple of months ago. And I was like, hey, you're doing some cool stuff with this AEO stuff. I have lots of questions. Would love to have you on the pod or on office hours. And here we are. So we made it happen. And there we go. I'm going to share again. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Matt. Give us the rundown on what we're going to get into today, and then let's just talk. I might pepper you with some questions here and there, as I'm very curious about learning about the space. So let's do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I think first and foremost, wanted to give, I think a little bit of background of how kind of our business has grown, the product and the community we have has grown, and some of the kind of like grounding principles and then tactics that we've used, which can be summarized as teach first, sell second. I wouldn't say there's anything crazy groundbreaking in what we're doing, but really about how we tie it all together and then just remain consistent in our approach. We'll talk through a little bit of the examples, how you can get started. And then there's kind of a funny parallel between our go-to-market approach overall around this, and actually how you can have success in this emerging set of channels that I think we call AI search collectively. So we can talk about that a little bit, some of the things that, help you sort of teach these emerging models to then be good to your brand out in the world. And then, can talk through, if you were going to get started on this type of approach, whether you're an early stage startup or you already have product market fit, ways you can get going. So excited to dive in. And please jump in with questions, and Pranav, please fire away.
Let's do it. All right, let's kick it off. All right, so tell me, did you all come up with this concept of teach first, sell second? Is that something that you've always done? Like, how did it originate? How did it start? And then we can just get into the content.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good, sales strategy content out there that existed way before, we even started AirOps, that I think very fundamentally recommends that you add value in every interaction you have with your customer. To oversimplify it, outbound to prospects performs better if there's an offer or if there's an exchange of value without the expectation per se of, doing something in return. I think as it pertains to our audience and approach, this is vitally important because we sell to marketers. marketers and CMOs, VPs of marketing, VPs of growth, they are potentially more so than any other function inundated with both marketing and sales. Everyone, they have budget, so therefore a lot of SaaS companies and agencies and any number of purveyors are constantly trying to break through with them. And so when you marry those two kind of like fundamental concepts together, one, always add value in any sort of go-to-market touch with customer, and marketers are inundated with marketing and sales. It really kind of fundamentally connects together that our audience really wants to learn from and frankly buy from and be marketed to by other marketers who are knowledgeable and have, I would say, like really valuable information to share with them, especially with the kind of undercurrent of crazy transformation and in some ways scary evolution of some of the channels they're accustomed to. So that's really kind of the groundwork or the sort of like materials that we started from and how we then built from there.
Cool. All right. Tell us about what the methodology is, what the framework is. I know you have lots of great stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, I think the first piece of this is really understanding your audience and who they are specifically. And there's a couple layers to that. I would start first with sort of like who, assuming you're selling a SaaS product, or even if you're an agency or a consultant, right? The first objective is like who is the core base user of your product? Like what is the job that they have to do, and how are you either making it easier, making it faster, or helping improve the quality of it? That is like the first thing to identify. And it sounds obvious, but it applies for any positioning exercise in marketing as it does for this framework. The second is understand both like who they report to and who is responsible for kind of their budget and their ability to access resources. And that is usually who your buyer will be, and the person who is also going to be really important both for you, to make a sale, but also to frame an education first go-to-market strategy around. You really need to be able to create content that educates the end user, but also educates the buyer, not only on what's important to them, but what also is important for their team to learn as well.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you a question there. So do you all, like for your own business or within AirOps, like can you actually write down the here are the clear jobs to be done? Do you actually help your customers, or like how do you actually go from that theory to practice? Like, are you writing these down? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time with customers actually understanding deeply sort of every part of their content production or content refresh or evaluation process. And then really what our platform does at its core is helping organizations replicate certain parts of that process, or in some cases the entirety, using a mix of workflows, AI, and their own internal and external data. And so what that requires you to do is really understand, okay, what are the most important parts of that process that are inputs to quality? And then what are the parts of the process that, take a ton of time, but might not be really valuable use of other folks' input. And so we do that almost on a daily basis with customers. And it's coalesced around kind of like several key parts of the process that we've then both built the product for, but also then positioned how we talk to the audience, how we create content. And that's everything from, doing really high quality research on a topic before writing content. It would be like one job to be done. Second would be what we might call context engineering. So understanding what unique information you have in your business that can be used to create content that is seen as information gain by LLMs. So answering questions that an LLM either is not trained on or doesn't have access to on the internet is really important to operate this channel. And that set of jobs to be done, in some ways, for a lot of organizations, is a whole new bucket of that. So those are a couple examples where we really try to define, kind of hammer that out, and then make the product to make it easier, yes, but also then really try to educate the end user on how important it is to think about, get right, and then resource against.
I love that idea of information gain. So this is like basically you're saying to really in layperson's terms, this data or this information doesn't exist anywhere else on the internet. And it's there because it's proprietary, in some ways proprietary to like what you are doing, or proprietary point of view, things of that nature.
Totally. I have a slide on this later. We can come back to it, but there's I can give like an example of that for if you go one slide over. I like to use the analogy of Pac-Man. So Pac-Man has a very simple objective function. His reason for being is eating all the little dots and I guess Martians on the screen. LLMs in certain ways are like Pac-Man. They're fiends for new information that they don't have yet, right? And so their objective function is to, you know, gain more knowledge to, you know, either create AGI if you're kind of training the models, or if you're creating an LLM as a kind of new search platform, it's to make sure that if someone asks a question, it doesn't either hallucinate or tell the end user, hey, I can't answer that question. Anytime that happens, you're either going to have churn or distrust or both, right? And so I love the example of Ramp. I'm pretty sure most of the audience is probably familiar with them. They actually have a full-time economist on staff that does benchmarking research on using their own anonymized spend data on different categories. So what you're looking at on the left is the benchmarking of AI spend by company size in like 2024, I think this is. You can imagine someone asking an LLM that question, and Ramp has provided really the only information on the internet that answers that question. And so when you ask, hey, give me a breakdown of AI spend by company size in Q1 2024, Ramp is what's shown to you. This study is aggregated and synthesized and sent to you. So this is not to say you need to have a full-time economist on staff at your startup. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of types of what we call frontier knowledge living inside your organization that can be used to create information gain content. But I think this is like a particularly poignant example. And so this is a great example of something that wasn't always done in the old world of SEO. There's a lot of content created that was reorganizing information on the internet, and in some ways like improving the quality of that information. But in a world where an LLM can instantly synthesize and render an answer to an end user, it's this unique data that you have that is really important to winning the game and then being cited and mentioned in the answer. So pause there.
This is a great example, and you know, like you said, first you have to have the data, right? And then you have to have some person or process to extract the data and then present it in a way that is, you know, value adding to your audience. Have you seen other examples? Like Ramp is obviously a great example. I love what they're doing. I know Carta does a great job of this as well. I'm forgetting the name of the individual there, Peter something, who puts out great content for startup funding and what have you. Is there an example that is a little bit left field, not sort of one of the popular, you know, brands that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think some really good ones are either interviewing internal experts in your business on a topic. I think is one that's a little bit more, I would say, like qualitative, or like you can sometimes create this knowledge just by talking and taking a screen, like a, you know, a voice note of someone smart in your business on a topic, talking about something that adds a new perspective, you know, creating a blog post or adding that to a relevant product page, right? So that's one example. And then on the more kind of like higher volume side, we have, you know, we work with a lot of consumer marketplaces, like an Upwork or, you know, an Angie's List. They have years of really awesome data on their kind of like their marketplace pricing, you know, important jobs to be done for their end, you know, demand part of their marketplace. And so that often is a great morsels for LLM's edification, so to speak. So you can start small and create it, or sometimes you have giant treves of data that can then be synthesized and used for this purpose.
So I have an idea here that, so when we have a podcast that this office hours is going to go on as well, it's called Brandformance. And that podcast, when I have guests coming on that show, one of the things that I do is I go and search YouTube for all their previous podcast appearances or blog posts that they've written or been featured on. I put it into a notebook LM right now. Maybe we'll use AirOps for this. And I then query notebook LM to say, you know, first tell me all the interesting things or angles that they've talked about. Now tell me all the things that they haven't talked about, but they probably have a point of view on. And that's like the information gain point of like that content doesn't exist. So it's kind of like that. I really like this concept. And I think more, hopefully the audience is finding this helpful. Okay. I know you have this sort of I love this slide, by the way. So let's get into this and talk about how you all do this at AirOps and tie it back to information gain.
Yeah, 100%. I love that we're jumping around. It's more organic this way. But so, kind of talked about the principle that our audience really wants to learn from and be marketed to and sold to by people they trust, typically other marketers or folks who, have a unique perspective on growth. And so, we learned that really early on in this business, just in terms of, the webinar content. Like the first time we took a crack at a webinar, it worked really well having someone really respected in growth and SEO. I like to joke that we have the New York Yankees of SEO, eager and excited to both have a platform to share about what they're learning, and kind of the frontier knowledge they're creating in their own research, as a way that then allows our audience in a high trust way to get learnings on how to tackle this channel. So I'd be the first to say that we come from a place that we're not the deepest experts. We're investing in our own first party research, but it is such a fast moving and emerging space that the first thing we do is try to create a platform for others who are really smart in this space, and then create content around it. So everything in the middle of this, the first box there, is really around creating great webinar content with experts in the space. And we try to get a mix of folks who run agencies, folks who do kind of great first party research, folks that are practitioners within organizations, both big and small. And so the diversity of the audience here, I think, really matters. And it kind of, going back to the information gain content, it allows you to scratch different itches, both with the audience and the model. And then we've then evolved that to create our own, we call it AirOps University. We run a kind of perpetual cohort program, both to learn AirOps, the platform, but also importantly to learn about what's happening in this shift in organic as a channel and the tactics that, the best brands in the world are using to win there. And so that helps us it helps us sort of actualize a lot of things that the webinars are providing, and then put them into really practical use. And then it also becomes a great source of user generated content, both in the kind of hackathon type environment we create, and we have a certification program that people are super proud of, and we've now have a jobs marketplace around content engineering, which is what we call the role associated. So that's another kind of pillar of.
Can I pause you on that? That's a really interesting concept. So let's talk about this AirOps University. How often do you run the cohorts? Tell us a little bit about how that works. Is it weekly, monthly? It looks like a Zoom call. Tell us more about the mechanics of this.
Yeah, it's on a 2-week cycle, and we're working on both ramping up the capacity we can do and also making more of it kind of self-study online. It's about an hour a day for 2 weeks, and there's kind of a capstone project at the end, really designed to have everyone leave with some meaningful ROI improvement to their either content process or their sort of broader organic growth operations. And yeah, I think we do between 50 and 100 in a cohort, and then we kind of break people out. So it's virtual. We've done in person with bigger teams as well, but seeing other people do the work is really effective in this kind of learning AI and master a new channel, so to speak.
I mean, this is such a cool idea. Is this just for customers, or is it open to anybody on the internet?
No, I think part of what's worked really well here is getting a broader mix of people who've either used the product and are customers, or people who aren't. Somewhat tactically that helps with sales cycles, right? You speed time,
Nice.
There's a little bit of a learning curve in some cases. If you're trying to do something like a content refresh on your site, you have 50,000 pieces of content. It's a pretty big learning curve, and so we try to. It helps build empathy for one, how hard some of this is, but also then helps accelerate people to value on key things that would otherwise take very intensive onboarding once you sign and start using the platform. So it's short answer is we welcome all, and it's a great way of expanding.
Okay. Another very tactical question around this, because I think it's really important. Do you get permission from people to then say that, hey, we might be recording this? How do you make the UGC part of that easy, or what's your tactic there?
Yeah, we try to, I don't, and I will, if I'm getting this wrong, I'll have my growth team send out a press release apology. We try to create moments where the individuals can be kind of proud or showcase what they are. Like most of all the group together content doesn't make for as good content. Someone like going and demoing their own AirOps workflow at the end. So yeah, we get permission. Usually it's like people proactively posting. I think we have merch involved that they may not be tied to posting something on LinkedIn. So I fibbed a little earlier when I said there's not a little bit quid pro quo, but our AirOps content engineering sweatshirts are worth one post on LinkedIn, I would say.
There you go. There you go. Hey, merch is a great way to do marketing. I like it. I like it. All right. I interrupted you. Yeah.
No, great. So like AirOps U is the other pillar. And then more recently, really over the last like 9 months or so, we've really invested in more first party research or partner research where our team is, helping conduct usability studies or really ways of learning how LLM based AI search is different from traditional Google search and kind of how these models are behaving and evolving there. And so that has been a source of great content in its own right to, share and educate the audience, but also then is a great example of kind of information gain content. And so with those kind of 3 pillars of content, the principle, and 10 is probably not enough some cases, we try to use every piece of content at least 10 times. And so all the outer boxes here, we think of them as like the spokes around this kind of hub and spoke model are ways that we distribute. We have a really great team that, cuts up video into smaller bite-sized pieces. We have an awesome go-to-market engineer who helps run kind of cold outbound and warm outbound campaigns. We read a newsletter, and really like a lot of this is then being powered by a mix of AirOps and then like the right expert and the person who's is like a master of the set of channels that they own for that to then recreate it. And so that you just get a ton of leverage by using your content more than one time. And interestingly, there's some times where like you don't expect something to hit, especially on LinkedIn. Like there's something small that maybe it didn't work as well in like an outbound campaign, but you put it on LinkedIn and you get some like great engagement on it. So it's a great way of having multiple at bats on the same set of messaging and then helping that evolve your overall messaging as well, because you have so much data that you've collected on is it working or what's not, or what's playing well versus what could be improved.
Now, we have some shared customers, so I know you have some consumer companies as well, right? And you already kind of mentioned like you've got the Upwork and Angie's List and folks like that. How does this apply to the consumer world? Like, are there interesting examples that because obviously they're not doing webinars, but what does the modality look like for them?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think it comes back to like the way I think about it is like what are the most kind of like interesting bits of information that would be relevant to your audience. Customer reviews, if you have really like raving reviews, I think would be one kind of starting in the middle of this. If you're a bigger organization spending on brand campaigns, right? You have a celebrity. There might be limits in how you use, but if you have like Matthew McConaughey, to use an extreme example, like Benioff is definitely getting every morsel of content at Matthew McConaughey's likeness that he can, so to speak. So it's like if you're working with a micro influencer, right? Like use it on TikTok, use it on Instagram. Like this might sound obvious to a B2C marketer, but like try new channels with the same content cut up, and you might be surprised on how it performs. But yeah, anything that can add information or clarity around your product and how it's different or why someone should get excited about it, I would try to run through your set of channels, and maybe it's a good way of experimenting into kind of like new channel sets that you might have, like prove them on one and then like reuse the content with one along the way.
Very cool. All right, so use every piece of content in multiple modalities. I love that. We try to do more of that as well. We already talked about this concept of frontier knowledge. Should we talk about what this is looking like in practice? I love the Docebo team. I know they speak very highly of. I actually heard about you guys at an event in the summer, Highline, which was hosted by User Evidence. And Sylvia, who runs marketing or growth marketing at Docebo, was up on stage talking about how they were in love with AirOps and how it's helping. So kudos to you for like that, in the wild, real sort of advocacy that you have going for you.
Well, appreciate it. Yeah. The Docebo team's awesome. I think I didn't include her on the slide explicitly, but I'll give her a shout out. So they have a team member named Valeria who has an awesome mix of data science background and SEO background, like you couldn't pick a more perfect background for what we call content engineering. And really what that is taking, principles of marketing and really taste and kind of marrying that with both kind of systems thinking and system building and, I would say a reasonable amount of kind of data facility, understanding like, what types of data can I work often with like a data team or someone on engineering potentially to pull things that would then help inform content. So a great example of where we see a lot of organizations moving at least some part of their content operations in-house around an individual like this. And it's really important for extracting that information gain content, that frontier knowledge, because if you're outsourcing the entirety of your content strategy and execution, it's really hard for there's great agencies in the world. This isn't to demean agencies, but in a world where it's fully outsourced, you don't have the right connective tissue between the stakeholders in the organization, either to go interview, the expert as we talked about earlier, or to, get a summarized Snowflake data table that can then be used to like make a piece of content pop, right? Like it just goes faster if you have someone on the inside who has the network, the leverage, and the understanding of the entire system. And ideally they've built it themselves without using AirOps. So
Yeah.
that's a big trend that we've seen here. And I think Docebo is a great example of this, of really sort of like creating a center of excellence internally around content engineering, and then really all the other stakeholders that are needed to, get a single piece of content live or to kind of break into new segment. And I think this, I would tie this back to, you know, you're kind of teaching the models here, right? So it's like the teach first is like, it's a little bit meta, but the teach first strategy, sell second, right? Like if you're actually providing solid information, you're adding value to kind of like what these models consume when they're being asked questions by your end user, you're going to be more likely to show up as the kind of connective tissue about it. And you can think of, we see it as one system, right? I think the models in the LLMs at the end of the day were sort of like trained to think and write and answer questions around the same way humans were. And so writing for and creating content for them is similar to humans. There's just like some ways that you need to do it, that either you need to do it faster, you need to do it deeper, and then it needs to just be, I think, more unique in some cases than the old way of doing things.
On that point, I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
We both, so you mentioned that you have a GTM engineer in your business. We have a GTM engineer in our business, right? And some people think about and then you've introduced this concept of a content engineer, and I actually love that idea. The question I have for you is, are we just putting new labels on old things, or is there something fundamentally different about this new way of working where this engineering mindset is going to be a lot more important? And, I'm also being a little bit self-critical about this because, hey, marketing is marketing, and, the labels are sometimes a little bit silly. But I do think that you have to be a lot more technical going forward. And that is a trend in pretty much every go-to-market function, whether it's, overall sort of ops and analytics, whether it's content, whether it's sales, like everything is getting more technical. And that's kind of the nature of what's happening with this AI transformation, where it's also making it, I was talking to somebody earlier today, sorry, I will go on a little tangent here. And we talked about this idea that this concept of democratizing, everyone uses that word for different things. And I feel like it's finally happening. Like it's actually happening that if you are in go-to-market world and you can learn how to be technical and learn how to do all these things, and therefore the velocity and the quality of your work gets better and faster. I answered my own question, but I'm curious if you agree with me, or do you have a different take on this?
I would say a couple things are happening at the same time. One, agree with you that the need to, I'll call it, build systems, which and then evaluate and kind of perpetually improve those systems, is that skill set has never been in more demand, is actually like vitally important. There's sort of like two underlying components to that. One is the ability to become more technical or to use tools that would previously require you to be, quote unquote, a proper engineer. The bar is lowering. So, the ability to like vibe coding, I think is like one way of putting it, but like actually, connect systems and create systems with a less traditionally technical background is going down, while the thing that's not changing particularly as it pertains to content engineering, and I would argue go-to-market engineering well, is the sort of like taste premium. So people having the ability to understand like what good writing is, clarity of thought in the go-to-market engineering context, being able to like review and understand the hooks of a message to an end user, or like what the offer is. Like those are things that in some ways are becoming like the scarce part of the system, as the bar for, like writing a line of Python goes to zero, so to speak. I don't think it takes away the need for technicality in the sense of understanding how the system works together and then understanding how to properly eval that system. I think that is a core engineering principle that we need to teach more of, but it'll be less the like rote code and more of that on the technical side. And then really the bottlenecks become like, yeah, are you a systems thinker builder? And then do you have the ability to apply taste or to find taste within the organization to apply it? A lot of times it's like the go-to-market engineer is best served by having a partner in brand or PMM like efficiently paired with them versus like trying to like, or product, right? Like to talk about something that is a little over their depth, but having the judgment to know when that's the case is important. So.
Love that. Love that. Couldn't agree more. All right. What else do we have? All right. There we go.
Yeah,
Tell us about this. Yeah.
I think like how would you get started on this? And I would be lying if I said, hey, we had this grand strategy to use, make webinars cool again, or for the first time. Like this wasn't like, this was a lot of iteration of throwing spaghetti at the wall. I'll be like the first to admit. And I think when you're, especially earlier stage startups, you have some momentum and traction and you're really trying to prove product market fit. The number of at bats you should be taking on go to market, there's almost not, you need to make sure that you put enough resources to like actually get signal, but like there should be a lot of shots on goal. And that's like a first operating principle we have as a business. And I think was key to learning. But the first thing I would do if you're kind of a little bit farther on in your go to market is I would audit all your comms and channels. So your outbound sales message, your website, if you have a newsletter, what you're posting on LinkedIn. Are you ever like asking something without adding value or adding some sort of substantial value? And I think that's some pretty low hanging fruit to, hey, what's a unique offer? And if you're early stage, just offering the founder's time, like thoughtfully, I think can be like a great piece of value add. Especially pre-product market fit. Every founder should be doing, any SaaS founder should be doing cold LinkedIn like sequences that just offer, be like, hey, I'm a founder. Here's my story. Can I have 15 minutes to give you feedback? Like you will close more ARR doing that than any other hook possible thing. And your time as a founder towards someone else, towards some portion of the market, is always valuable for them. And don't underestimate that, presuming you have something, a topic that's interesting. So like, it doesn't have to be crazy. Your own time can be something of value for someone else if framed properly. And then, yeah, I think the second, like getting started quick win is, what content do you already have and how can you reuse it already? Like you don't have to create some giant campaign to get more juice out of your existing content. I would bet if you just go through your, if you're active on LinkedIn, just go find a post and like have ChatGPT ask like, what are 3 angles I could take this content and like this goes back to your exact same question that you asked podcast guests, right? Like what are 3 ways that I could like branch from this concept that performed well and like you can get more calories out of it. So that's what I'd recommend short term. Medium term, I think it's really like this applies to more than just this framework for content strategy and growth, but like you need to like really dial your ICP. I'll be the first to admit, for the first, like 9 to 12 months of this business, we were way too horizontal in terms of how we talk to the audience. Like it feels painful, but like the more dialed in you can get on your ICP, the better. And to really do this strategy, right, to sort of like teach people, you need to know who you're teaching and what they care about learning. And then, yeah, I think it's just like, as you create content, like write down the 10 ways you're going to use, like if it's a webinar, if it's a course, if it's a newsletter, like write down the 5 to 10 ways you're going to use and distribute that content before you move on to the next one. And then just have like have a checklist that like you can have someone on the team own and do.
Very cool. I wanted to talk about one specific thing, and if people have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. One question that I think about all the time is this idea of refreshing your content. I'll give you an example. We wrote like 5, core pieces of content, like blog posts, when we launched back in like late 2023 or early 2024, I forget. And I don't think I've gone back and touched those in 2 years, right? And I'm like, ah, like what am I gonna do to update that, right? Like it's like it was a founder point of view on the market and like core fundamental sort of things. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm making a mistake there, but you will have a lot more insight into like how important is it to refresh that content, and what does that even mean? What does it mean to refresh content? Because like my point of view hasn't changed. It's actually just maybe it's gotten more nuanced, but like all that is in my head. So how would I do that in practice? Like any thoughts on that?
Yeah, great use case, both for AirOps and generally for teams that are trying to get more juice from their existing content. There are the first to your question, the why would you refresh content? 70% of what is cited by LLMs, and we've replicated this study multiple times since it's one of the few consistent ways they behave. 70% of the cited content by LLMs and cited brand citations and mentions are from content that has been created in less than 12 months. So the way LLMs work, and this is one of the big differences between traditional SERP and SEO and AI search, and there's fewer than people would let on, I'll be the first to admit, is that freshness. There's a premium on freshness of content. And so that means, yes, you need to create more, but it also means there's a huge opportunity to refresh existing content. And so I kind of break that down into 3 ways that you can or should think about it. The first is, and kind of like the lowest hanging fruit, is just page structure. I do have kind of the schema and metadata of the page. Is that optimized for readability by LLMs and for Google? It's helpful for Google as well. That can be done in a fairly automated way and is a way to get kind of a boost like right away. The second is a little bit more involved, but adding content depth. So adding things like FAQs to pages or customer reviews, like where can you add more information gain content to your existing pages? And maybe in the case of you having a founder POV, maybe you write a preamble that's like, here's how my views have changed in the last 6 months, or here's like how my priors were updated or strengthened around what it was. Like it doesn't need to be like a full rewrite. It can be a paragraph you had that refresh the date and you add some new lines from your perspective. So content depth is the second, and then the third is the hardest technically, especially for big brands, is making sure that the information you have in your content is most relevant to your current products and services in the market. So if you're like Anne Klein as a customer, and if Anne Klein has their line talked about in their content from like fall of 2023, it's not going to perform well in a page. So you need to make sure you're updating it based on your product catalog if you're in consumer, or whatever the freshest pricing data is if you're running a marketplace, right? Like having the right products and services talked about and having those be accurate is the third way I would say brands are refreshing content. That is really important, I would say, both from the LLM performance, but also for the end user to then be able to purchase or learn about the product.
Very cool. All those make sense. I have some work to do to refresh that old content. One of the people are asking, so Ishan is asking, are there specific risks the AEO GEO world of leaving old content behind, or is it more just opportunities and refreshing it? I don't quite understand the question. But yeah, maybe you do. Yeah.
So there are times when actually pruning content, that would be like the fourth way of refreshing content, is like you just remove it and it actually will help your overall site perform. Couple of examples of this: if you had a lot of, and there are certain brands who, this goes back to the point of the old world of SEO, you could get a lot of revenue and clicks from reaggregating or restructuring information either already on your site or already on the web. So basically like purely informational content. If the vast preponderance of the content on your site is sort of like thin informational content, it's actually a good opportunity to remove some of that, given that is seen as lower value by LLM. So like that's an example where you might want to kind of remove or enhance it with more proprietary information or unique point of view that actually moves it in the world from just like something you could find on Wikipedia or the LLM already has in its brain to, hey, this is actually adding some unique flavor to it. And then the second example would be, did you pivot? This is probably relevant for startups. Like, did you pivot the company entirely? You probably, if you're now like a no code like
Yeah.
lovable clone versus you were like a data product previously, you should probably take some of the blog posts for like, we've been there before, we pivoted a few times. So like definitely look at old content relevant to the raw ACP, and that's a good candidate to take off the site.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, we are at the end of our session. If other people don't have questions, I've got one more spicy one for you. So I read recently that there's, some VP at Google who put out this thing of like, hey, GEO and AEO is basically just the same as SEO. I'm sure you came across that quote. I think it was Nick Fox at Google who said that. And, obviously we all know that it's not exactly the same, right? If it were the same, you wouldn't have sort of hundreds and millions of users going to all of these LLMs and doing sort of research differently. What's the truth there, and what do you think is untrue there?
Yeah, there's I'm happy we have some content on this that I'm happy to share, but a couple of the big, I'll summarize the biggest differences. There's sort of four. The first one is what we've talked about extensively, is the old world of informational only, basic informational content could work in the previous world. It doesn't work now because of instant synthesis by LLMs. The second is that freshness matters a lot more for AI search, including Google's own Gemini and AI mode and AI overviews. The third is that your offsite strategy. So this is a little bit in the weeds, but important. It used to be you wanted to get high trust sites to add a link to your content, so backlinks. Those still matter, but now just textual mentions or no follow links actually matter as much or have their own impact. So the game offsite is actually much bigger, and there's a lot more surface area to potentially win. And that's important. Back to the point of an LLM will instantly render the answer for you. They can render information about your brand directly from off your site, rather than in the old world of SERP having to go through a link on your site or like send the user to the site, right? They're just providing you 10 links. Now they're providing you the answer. 85% of the time they get that answer from another site mentioning you or linking to your content. So that is way more important than it used to be. And then the fourth relates a little bit to, how the work is done. We're in a world now where high quality content can be created in a really high leverage way using the right mix of, LLMs, connectivity to your data, the right systems and workflow, and the right individual in-house who's like running those systems, the Valeria we talked about. That wasn't possible in the old world of SEO. So like that isn't so much a channel shift, just more so like how the work can be done, and the amount of work that can really be gotten to is a multiple or several multiples of it was previously. And content refresh is a great example though. So long-winded answer, but those are the four ways that we see it being different.
No, that's great. That was very clear and concise. So thank you. Should I have asked you a question that I haven't asked you about this whole space?
Oh man, I think the question to ask is, how do you know, like the spiciest two questions we get are like, how do you trust these like like estimations on prompt volume of what people are asking, and then the other is like, is AI content, like, does it actually perform or not? The second one quickly is, ungrounded AI content will get you penalized and not perform. So not having information gain content is like the absolute worst. And then human review is actually very critical for most types of content. So that would be my answer on that one. And then the first question of like the prompt volume reliability, until Google and OpenAI released their version of Google Search Console for AI prompts, a approximation at best is what any kind of data provider can give you there, and anyone saying otherwise that it's ironclad is full of it. So do your own research.
Well said, Matt. Nobody likes this is the common issue, right? People just look at a dashboard and go like, it must be true. And I appreciate the transparency from you on your point of view there, that is directional, and that's the best you can do with a black box environment. And I love what you said. I'm pretty sure Google will just add all of this stuff to Search Console, and OpenAI will someday have to reveal that if they want to monetize it in some shape or form, right?
If they do ads, they kind of have to. Yeah, it's like
You know, you have to.
totally
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there'll be an AI console or a search console or whatever you call it. Very cool. Matt, this was very educational. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And folks, go follow Matt on LinkedIn. He's pretty active there. Go check out AirOps if you're curious about how to put this into practice. I know we will be sending our team to you all and maybe the university. That sounds like a fun way to get going. And yeah, thanks for doing this. All right, folks, that was Matt Hammel, the co-founder at AirOps. He is a prolific writer on LinkedIn. They have great content overall, so go check out AirOps yourself and tune in again next week for another great episode of Brandformance. See you then.